Okay, guys, let's start that. So I'm going to share my screen. So can you see my screen all right, everyone? I'm going to take it as yes, because I don't see your cameras anymore. So,
Yeah.
Okay. What is estimation? That's a little presentation from the Scottish Tech Army. And here we go. Estimation is a way to look at the work that is coming our way and discuss each ticket that comes our way and gain a common understanding. So the teams estimate their work to support the planning. So you know how we work in sprints. Our sprints are a bit different. Our sprints tend to be quite long. Normally in a work environment, they would be about 2 weeks. That's probably most common. And during those 2 weeks, you would just pull a number of those tickets, and you would want to know how big those tickets are. You don't want to work on just a few tickets that are very small, or just, or 15 tickets that are massive. So once you kind of know a bit more about planning, about estimating, knowing how to estimate and what goes into that supports your planning effort. And as I said, it helps team to reach the common understanding. This is the time when you're estimating tickets, this is the time to ask all the questions you might have, and that there'll be people who you will be able to discuss this. It's not just that you ask the questions to somebody answers your questions. It's a team exercise, and it is also useful for burn down charts, which is more of a metric which teams might use during the retrospectives, that shows like this velocity that team works with, and it basically it says here what the burn down charts are. They show the amount of work that has been completed in a sprint and the total work remaining. Okay. So what is estimation? And we've got a graphic because it is really the fine art of guessing. The agile estimation that we are working with is relative and it's not absolute. And I'll show you in a moment what's the difference between the two. The estimation, which is very important, involves the whole team. It's developers, designers, and testers, QAs, and a product owner, a product manager in different organizations. And this is, like I said, this is the whole team discusses each ticket. And when you estimate, you have to take a lot of factors into account. And these are factors like how much work needs to be done, the complexity of it, as well as any risks of uncertainty that might come with doing this work. So you might look at the ticket and think, well, that's going to be easy. It's going to take me, no time to do it. But is there any risk that you might not have the right software to do it? Or maybe, I don't know, maybe this thing is going to grow arm and legs, or something's going to be changed somewhere down the road, or testing is going to be very hard. This sort of things need to be raised at that point while estimating and taken into account. And yeah, it should be very much a holistic view of the ticket when you're estimating it. So here's my lovely example of the absolute estimation versus relative estimation. With the absolute estimation, the question would be, what's the amount of liquid in the glass on the left side? And it will be very difficult for you to say whether it's, 450 mils or, is it half a liter. With the relative estimation, the question really is which glass has more liquid, and that is easy, or easier. Definitely easier in this case. People generally are better at relative estimation. Okay. So when it comes to actually estimating work, it will be quite difficult when you pick up the ticket to say, oh, it's going to take me that much time to do it. But you would be, it will be easier for you to say, well, this, I will be able to finish this piece of work faster, like twice as fast as this other piece of work that I've been working on. And another very important thing to remember is that we will not be estimating in hours. So although here the example, the blurb says how many hours, it's more about like how much time. And I know that it kind of sounds the same, but it's not the same. You might spend twice as much time, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be 2 hours. It might be 4 hours. And when the team estimates with story points, they assign a point value to each item. So like I said, 2 story points should be twice as much work as a 1 story point item.
Yeah, if I could just add something, Magda, if that's okay. Yeah, it's less about time, I would say. It's like, it is definitely like relative effort. So for example, there's a good example here that looks quite good, but in a coding sense, what a lot of teams will try and do is think about what their kind of smallest piece of work is. So you might decide, for example, an example of the smallest thing we do is maybe a 1-line change in a config file and making sure that that's worked correctly, or changing a font color in a theme, or something small, and that can be like a baseline for a point. And then we can think, okay, so if it takes me 1 point to do this relatively small thing, and then we're talking about this other task that we have to do, how many times more effort? So it's more like relative effort rather than relative time. So again, it could be time complexity, the fact that maybe we need to do like some extra, like digging into something, etc. So we can talk about that and then come up with these relative estimations, which I think they generally work a lot better than saying what's going to take me so many days, because all sorts of things can interfere with like time-based estimation, like whether some environment's available or whether there's like other things going on that are like outside of the control of the team. So relative estimation is just focused on what you can do within the team.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Okay, so there are different estimation techniques, and I've put here a few of the more popular ones, and the ones that you might then see in a work environment. The planning poker, which I think is definitely the most popular and the one that you might be hearing the most, even kind of thrown off, in conversations. And I'll show you an example of that after this presentation, where you're using the Fibonacci sequence numbers, and you discuss. There is a ticket that you're discussing. You can vote using those cards without knowing what other people are saying, so simultaneously. And then, depending how you all voted, you maybe then start a discussion, or maybe you are all on the same page, and you've estimated the ticket. The T-shirt sizes, I think that's kind of self-explanatory. It's you kind of need to decide about the baseline, like Peter mentioned, and then based on that, you then decide the T-shirt sizes. And the dot voting, like it says here, each member of the team gets a number of like little dots and uses them to vote on the size of the product backlog item that we're discussing. More dots mean there's more time and effort required. Less dots, it's it's a pretty straightforward item. So if I was thinking that if we're going to be doing estimation in our team, I would suggest planning poker, mostly because it is the most popular, and for those who are looking to have a career or already have a career in software development. this is probably the one that you're going to be working with, and maybe it's the best way to get familiar with. Like Peter said, the whole team agrees on the baseline stories. It is good to have a common understanding of what is a small, medium, and a large piece of work. You know, the longer the team works together, it is easier to kind of look back and decide what was the large piece of work and what was the small piece of work, and kind of treat those as baselines. All other stories will be compared to that, maybe not like, you know, line by line, so to speak, but, you know, the amount of effort that, you know, you would have used. And then again, taking into consideration the complexity of the work and the size and risks, like I mentioned earlier. And then each member of the team estimates using the Fibonacci sequence, like I've just mentioned, using those cards. And I am happy to answer a question, what is a Fibonacci sequence, later on, because I've also discovered that quite recently. And all the team members reveal their cards at the same time and discuss any differences. So if you have a ticket and somebody says, oh, it's a 3, while somebody else says, oh, it's an 8, you would want to discuss why somebody thinks it's a relatively simple task in comparison to somebody who thinks, oh, well, actually, that's going to be quite a big work. You want to reach that common understanding with the whole team and then agree the final story point value. Last couple of things that I would want you all to remember is that you're not estimating in hours or days. It's a relative effort, and you know, it might be a relative. If you're new, it's going to take you longer than if you have been working on this piece, like, you know, with this company, with this team for a long time, and you know the work that's coming your way. So just be aware of that, and do not get swayed or pushed into thinking that you're estimating in hours or days. And the more the team works together and estimates together, the better the estimations are going to get. Initially, there might be quite wild, and it might require a lot of discussion, but it also means that as a team, you get a better understanding of the work that's coming your way. And you will never know everything. Sometimes you will underestimate and sometimes overestimate until you actually start working on a ticket. It is very hard to say what's going to happen. You can, as we said before, it's a fine art of guessing. You can do your best and hope for the best. And as always, ask questions to make sure you understand the work that is being estimated. I don't think it's stressed quite enough that only by asking questions, you really understand what you're going to be doing, and you don't want to start working and then start having questions and realize that the small ticket you have picked up has actually grown arms and legs. And there are no losers in this poker game. So, you know, that's good. So I have a little estimation game for you here, guys. So Fibonacci sequence, where 100 is obviously the biggest size, 1 is the smallest, and somewhere in between is up to you how you're going to decide that. So feel free to put in a chat what you think is the order, or maybe you want to unmute and say what do you think the animals should be sized as. I am going to tell you that there are no good or bad answers in here. I think there are different levels of complexity when it comes to some of the animals. So yeah, I'm gonna give you, I don't know, a couple of minutes maybe.
Maybe as people do the sorting, I can maybe add one thing from my experience.
Yes.
You were talking, Magda, about that baseline. What we found very useful is to always have that visible in our estimation, so that people can do exactly what's on your screen. I've got those kinds of things to compare in front of them all the time, to focus on that relativity more than the amount of time, because as you say, it's very quickly just slips into your mind. Oh, I think it's just a couple of hours or just a small change that I'll tweak a line of code. But then when you need to place it amongst the other things, you very quickly realize that, oh, that's last time I picked a 1-line change. it actually ended up over there on the right. Maybe I should ask those questions, or there was something not attached to the ticket, or it wasn't fully fleshed out. So yeah, I think that's probably the key thing that I've learned as I've been working with teams is to have that baseline always visible, that relativity being the front and center of the estimation.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And as well, the teams change. You know, you will not always work with the same team. People come and go. People are not there because you know, because of holidays and sickness. And if you're not gonna know what's your baseline, then it's gonna be very difficult to estimate.
Yep.
Okay.
It also allows you to evolve it over time, so it's not a once and done. As things change, as your process changes, some tickets that were previously an 8 will now be a 5 because you've implemented a different tool or changed your process. So again, that's why it's useful to have that baseline and continuously evaluate it.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, I think when you talk about that as well, it's important to bear in mind that every team comes to this on their own, in the sense that just because you were in a team before that you maybe think, oh, this ticket feels like a 5, that team maybe has a slightly different baseline or a different way of looking at things, and so it's kind of it comes a point that the team basically ends up finding its own rhythm, finding its own numbers and its own way of estimating. So different teams will definitely do this differently in ways that suit them.
There's a beautiful live example of that, Peter, where some of us have naturally gone for the big, to start with the big, and some of us have gone for the small, and we're kind of trading the way back in.
I was just having a look at the chat, and what somebody said that the snake is 2. Peter, you said that. Are you sure? Snake's quite long and can be quite long, like the size of, I don't know, the length. Like if you think of a python, python is a very big snake in comparison to, you know, I don't know, something small. I don't know enough about snakes.
Yes, it's very true. And one of the things that we can maybe come back to in a future session is like ways to drive these kind of conversations as well. Yeah. So there's like various different techniques for doing that. One of the best ones, or a very good one, is something like example mapping, for example. Oh, boom boom, or some other things as well that can drive out a lot of these conversations. But because it can be a little bit unstructured at times. But you know, this is the kind of thing that's really ripe as well for using, say, 3 amigos within a team or something like that. So there's lots of different ways that we can like slice and dice estimation as well before we actually get our planning poker out. And Jira has a really nice plugin for planning poker. I've seen it done with like physical cards. Like I've done workshops where you got this like tiny little deck of cards and everyone had physical cards that you were like flipping over and stuff like that. So lots of different things you can do.
Yeah, I think that is true. I think in doing anything sort of in person also maybe helps the interactions and driving a discussion. But in the post-pandemic world, it's all offline, it's all online. So this is one of the Scrum poker or planning poker games that we could play. I think we're kind of running out of time, so I'm just going to show you guys here. Feel free. I can see Doogie's already here, so if you wanna join, and we get the way it would work is I would take a ticket, and for example, we have a ticket here. Okay, define user profile schema, and Victor most likely would give you a little overview of the ticket, answer any questions that you might have initially, and then everyone would go here and would vote. Unfortunately, I don't seem to have any, like, unless we would do the whole thing. I cannot really show you. The idea would be that, you know, Doogie says, oh, it's a 5, Peter thinks it's a 3, and you all kind of play your card. And the person who runs the game, in this case me, I would reveal the cards at the same time. and I could see what everyone voted, and I would then ask you questions. Okay, so Peter, why do you think it's a 3? And Dougie, why do you think it's a 5? You would like explain why you think that, both sides, and agree whether the complexity is actually lower, or the value of the work that we're going to be working on is slightly lower. The story points value, not the ticket, is lower or higher, and we agree the final story points, and we would just apply this to our Jira tickets because we use Jira for that. So, okay, I'm gonna stop sharing now, but do you have any questions, anyone? And is it something that you have done before? I mean, Graham, have you done something like that at your work?
No, generally there's just random tickets that I get assigned to me, and then I guess how long it will take, double it, and then maybe add a couple of days. That's more or less how I'm estimating.
Okay, it is a method. Okay, Dougie.
Yeah, so I work away all the time, so this is probably a really obvious answer, but does this system sort of not lend itself a bit towards everybody looking at a problem and saying, well, these are the easiest things and these are the hardest things, and all the stuff in the middle just becomes noise? Is there not? Does that happen? Is there a risk that the sort of task in the middle is either over focused, like we were all arguing about which one is the sort of third small, the third biggest or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Does the detail in the middle get lost, or is it just too much noise there, or I don't know?
Part of the theory is that over time, as you discover more big things like the 13 and more points, you would break them down, so you kind of arrange, I don't know which word is the right one, squashes or extends, or yeah, the things in the middle should actually start looking the same. And yeah, I guess in the final version of this, everything is kind of the same. All the work gets chunked into similarly sized items. You break down stories into small enough equivalents that you can just continue to work on them continuously. That's when people start talking about the Kanban approaches, when they get to that stage, when they've managed to get their work so atomized that everything is almost the same. That's when estimation starts to fall away. But yeah, you'll probably start with saying, yeah, this is very small, 1 line. No, this is very, very big, 15. And then things in between, don't know. But that's probably not that important as much as you've got that range. That's why I was saying that making that board with your previous guesses visible helps with some of that. That we've put that as a 3, but it maybe should have been an 8, so let's move that on our baseline and next time use that as the baseline. So that's how I've seen most teams tackle that.
Okay.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions, or maybe wants to add anything from your experience working with estimation?
The only thing I might add, guys, is basically the purpose of it is to make sure you deliver on the sprint. So the reason you're trying to estimate is so that stuff doesn't keep slipping out of your deliverables, basically. So it's an exercise. We even started to do it a little bit there. It's starting to get you to think about what you have to do to deliver the ticket. And the nice thing is sometimes the discussion of how you would approach it starts with those estimation things. And it doesn't mean you know everything, and we've seen signs of that where we've kind of said, oh, let's go and do a spike to discover more. Do you know what I mean? So it can be something that helps you kind of go, if we approach that for the next 2 weeks, for example, do we know enough to really start it? And you can actually, the discounting Dougie tends to be actually, we're not ready to do that, or holy moly, actually the client really needs that, so now we need to clear everything out of the way. So, and where I've seen groups really fail with this is going too complicated too quickly, because you don't immediately know how long it's going to take you to do something. So if you make it mega complicated straight off, unless you're fitting into a team that's been working on the same bit of code for a really long time, it can be quite hard, because when a team's been working together for a while as well, and they're building a product constantly, you know, Bob knows the back end, Sarah knows this bit, you know, so, and you end up talking to them about how you would do it a lot more as well. So the dynamic becomes very different with new stuff, existing stuff, old established teams, new teams. But it's, you know, a great presentation, Magda, really, really.
Thank you. I would also add, I think, Jonna, what you said is actually spot on. And as well, like I said, it's a team sport, and it is very important to remember that when you're estimating, you're not just estimating you as a developer, that, oh yeah, well, this is just a one-line change, so it's easy peasy. You have to think about the QAs, and the QAs also take part in the estimation, but you have to think about the whole effort, because maybe it's going to be a very hard thing to test, a very easy thing to change, but a very hard thing to test, and this has to be reflected in your estimation as well. So, and I'm also saying this here because we've got Lenore as our designer here, because we also take into account the designs. So that is also very important to remember, that those designs are part of the ticket as well. So, okay. So I think that kind of brings it, unless anyone has any other questions. I'm going to say this is the end of the presentation and discussion. So I think, Jonna, you can stop recording. I can start breathing.